Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? What technology allows us to do today is absolutely amazing. We are truly living in the future. But are we taking all of that technology for granted? Okay. I can hear you yelling at your screen. Yes, I think the answer to that question is pretty obvious. Of course, we're taking it for granted. Why wouldn't we? We have been surrounded by high technology for so long, some of us our entire lives, that we couldn't help but take a lot of this for granted and just count on it always being there. And I just wanted to take this episode to be a little bit more kind of, I guess, philosophical or brainstorming in nature. This isn't really going to be an episode that's very technically nitty gritty, as some of the previous ones have been. And I know some of you really like the more technically nitty gritty kind of ones. So if you're not too interested in the kind of philosophical ponderings of my mind, if you will, just go ahead and skip this episode. But this one was really prompted by something that happened the other day. And it's something that I've known and thought of for a long time, but it was really another one of those wow kind of moments. I've recently picked up some new vinyl records. You've probably seen in previous episodes, various videos that I've done, that while I don't really consider myself an audiophile, I really like music. I really like listening to music. And I've been getting back into vinyl records again, as a lot of other people have. And so periodically I'll go out and I'll, pick up new music, as a lot of people do. And one new album that I picked up, I went to go put it on the turntable to listen to it for the first time. And I had the record in my hands. I was kind of holding it up to set it down on the platter, and the light caught the record just right. And it really accentuated all of the grooves in the record. It really showed them off. You could see kind of each little individual shadow across the record. And it really struck me and reminded me that I was holding effectively just a piece of plastic. And that piece of plastic was able to produce excellent sounding music. I mean, it by no means is it some sort of lo-fi, rudimentary, caveman type of technology. It's some people believe that records sound better than any other form of recorded music that we have. I mean, they really do sound very good. And, I got to thinking, that technology has been around for a very, very long time. Not just in the form that we know it of, an electric turntable, and you put the thing on and you set the, move the tone arm over and you start the record spinning and you put it in the groove and it plays through an amplifier and speakers or headphones or whatever, where there are some electronics involved. It got me thinking, this technology has been around for generations, and it's so old, it predates modern or even ancient electronics. The very first phonographs were these mechanical devices, and they were like a hand crank thing, and they didn't have an electric amplifier and speakers or anything like that. They had a horn, this big horn attached to the stylus. And as the stylus went around on the record, just the mechanical vibration managed to produce that sound, and the horn kind of acoustically amplified it. Was it super loud? No. But it didn't require any electricity. It didn't require any electronics. It was just this purely mechanical device. And even back then, it worked. Of course, it wasn't to the fidelity standards that we have today, and not to discount the role that technology has played in taking really old things like, the very first phonograph and advancing them and making them better and better. But it's still kind of a mind blowing thing when you think about how much we've got now that's really based on technology that's very, very old and predates like electricity and integrated circuits and computers and all of the stuff that just surrounds us on a daily basis. It's kind of funny. You probably know, I've said in previous episodes, I work in IT as my day job. And so my job is to basically wrestle with computers all day, every day. Various aspects of them, the computers, the networking, the software, all of that. And periodically, I think it's a good idea to take a step back and look at it and like think about all the frustrations you've ever had with technology and how in some ways they're just like so meaningless in the big picture. You know what I mean? Like whenever Gmail has a hiccup or whenever Amazon Web Services has a hiccup, occasionally they'll have something go on in one of their data centers and the various services that are contracted out of AWS will not work correctly. Maybe Netflix will be a little slow. And it seems like the world freaks out when that happens. Or like I said with Gmail, maybe there's some hiccup going on with Gmail and you can't get into your Gmail inbox or Google Docs or whatever. And everyone just freaks out like it's the end of the world. It's kind of hilarious if you really think about it, take a step back and realize how wrapped up in all of this technology we've become. I mean, yeah, I know Gmail is down. Yeah, I know AWS is down, but you're still able to breathe. You're still able to eat and drink. You're still able to drive your car. You're still able to live life otherwise, yet because that one thing is down and it's become a major part of our lives and how we conduct our lives and our business, it ends up being a big thing to us, even though, to other people elsewhere on the planet, they may not even know what Gmail is. They don't care, It's what they call the first world problem. Oh my God, my internet is slow, or I can't get to this website, or my computer just crashed, or whatever. That sucks, but there are people in other parts of the planet who are wondering, am I going to be able to eat today? And, so the whole, I think, taking technology for granted really kind of cuts in several different ways, right? There's, like I just said with that example, the whole taking for granted the fact we have technology, that our cultures can be so affluent as to take technology for granted and have it always be there and assume that it's always there and working. And if something doesn't work, we can immediately just throw it out and buy another one, It's like the classic example of the inkjet printer. You buy a brand new inkjet printer, it comes with a couple of cartridges in the box, and the printer itself may cost $30 or $40. And when those cartridges run out, you need to go buy new ones, and the cartridges themselves cost anywhere between $20 and $40 each, and you need a separate one for black and color. And I've heard all the stories about people where they'll buy an inkjet printer, and as soon as the ink that came in the box runs out, they'll literally just throw the entire printer out and buy a new one because it's cheaper that way, right? Yet at the same time, there are people who can't even use a computer on a daily basis. They don't have that opportunity to, they're living in, sad to say, a lot of people are living in poverty on planet Earth. And even if they're not living in poverty, they don't have the opportunity to get involved in technology and education and that sort of thing. And so that's one way I think that we've been taking technology for granted. Another way I think is in not recognizing just how far we've come, right? Like vinyl records are one thing. They're, I think, very slowly, if they keep up the pace that they're at of becoming popular again and sales going up and all that, I do think that maybe we will see some slow incremental improvements still with vinyl record technology, which is kind of a hilarious statement in and of itself, where the sound quality just keeps getting a little bit better and the equipment that can play it gets a little bit better and that sort of thing. But other things, like it wasn't that long ago, comparatively speaking, when compact discs came out. And that was kind of a mind-blowing thing. And I talked about that in a previous podcast episode about high fidelity audio and high res audio and trying to get the most, that you can out of the sound quality. I'll include a link to that one so you can check that one out if you're interested. But, when CDs first came out, it was just a major improvement over everything that had come before. Not just sound quality, but also convenience, and ease of use, that sort of thing. Nowadays, we're even past buying MP3s, right? In the early 2000s, things like the iTunes Music Store came out, and that was a major improvement in ease of use and convenience. Instead of having to physically go to a store and find the music you want to buy, and the store may not have it and you'd have to order it or whatever, now you can get on the internet and you can buy the music there and download it to your device and play it in just the span of a few minutes and without even having to leave your house, with way, way better selection. It's funny that, just, what has it been, 35, 36 years ago, the CD came out in the very early 1980s, that now we're at the point where even the convenience of being able to click a button on your computer to buy the music and download it and have a copy of that, even that isn't seemingly good enough for people anymore. Because we've seen the rise of streaming music. People just want to push a button and it plays right away. We can't even get through a checkout process and a download and copy it to your device. No, I want to be able to just find it and play it right now because I'm that impatient or I'm that compulsive or whatever, other reasons people have, good or bad, why they prefer streaming over just buying music. And that's kind of funny. Comparatively speaking, going from, say, cassettes or vinyl records to CDs was a huge, huge jump. And yes, it was a big jump for the actual technology itself in terms of how it worked, but in also how it impacted humans, it was such a big jump. I wouldn't say it was as big of a jump going from, say, MP3s to streaming. Yet it's a major shift, yet it's yet another major shift, but it's just kind of a shorter logical step, to me at least. The other thing that really is kind of the foundation of this channel is that progression of technology and how things used to be compared to today and how simple things relatively were. The foundation of this channel, not the exclusive driver or content of this channel, but the foundation of it is retro gaming, of course. And one of the things that I really am into with retro gaming is the hardware. You probably know that. I've done lots of DIY videos about it. Yeah, the games are fun. I'm not going to say they're not. But what really gets me interested is the hardware. And it's in my mind, I've got this picture of what a computer is. And I think we all probably do, even a computer from the 1980s. We kind of know what that is. It's a CRT and a keyboard and a big box and maybe a mouse, and it runs some sort of user interface and all of that. And back then, a setup like that cost thousands of dollars. But you know what were also computers in their own right? Video game consoles. But they weren't really computers. They weren't really computers in the same way. They did a lot of the same things, and a lot of video game consoles were actually based on the same chips, the same technology as those full-fledged computers. But they weren't nearly as expensive and they were more limited in what they could do. But that's kind of fascinating to me, to see how much they were able to get out of that relatively limited hardware back then for such a low price, being able to push that technology to its limit. And it wasn't through, economies of scale or just throwing better parts at it. It was through human ingenuity, getting the hardware to do things that it otherwise shouldn't be able to do. I've talked in a previous episode, I can't remember which one it was about, but I gave the example of how sometimes on older game systems, the software developers learned tricks about the hardware that even the hardware engineers didn't know or didn't really take advantage of. And that there are some games for retro platforms that don't really even play all that well in emulation because the people who wrote the games found a trick in the hardware to make the game work better or look better or play faster or whatever that even the engineers didn't necessarily know about. And the people writing the emulators may still have to kind of go back and reverse engineer and figure out how to fix that because it doesn't, necessarily follow the traditional structure of the way that system was engineered as they knew it when they wrote the emulator. So trying to push all this to its limit and not really recognizing how much effort goes into it is, I think, another way that we take technology for granted. The last bit that I want to talk about with this is recognizing technology that we still have today that is technology in its own right, but isn't electronic. For example, I wear a mechanical watch. And lots of people ask me, because they know I'm into technology, dude, why don't you have a smartwatch? Why don't you wear an Apple Watch or something like that? Why do you have a mechanical watch? And for those not familiar, a mechanical watch is exactly that. It's all gears. It's all gears and springs and cams and levers and that sort of stuff. There is absolutely no electrical current flowing through this watch whatsoever. I don't have to put a battery in it. I don't have to recharge it. The way to recharge it is to simply wear it because there's a counterweight in here that winds a spring. And the spring is what makes the gears turn, and the gears turning is what advances the time. It's what turns it into a watch. But it's kind of mind-blowing when you think this is a wearable piece of technology, but it's got dozens of absolutely tiny little parts that work together to show the time. And on my watch, it can do more than show the time. It can show the day of the week and it can show the date. So it actually knows also what 24 hours are. It's not just spinning the hands around. And with this watch, and this is not an expensive watch by any means. I think I paid about $100 for it a few years ago. This watch will lose maybe 3 minutes every couple of weeks. It'll be 3 minutes slow every couple of weeks, and I'll just have to go and adjust it. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, that a thing like that can exist today that's completely mechanical. But what's even more mind-blowing is to think that 100 years ago, something like this existed. Pocket watches, they were the same way. Were they as accurate? No, probably not. But it was the same principle. And people managed to figure out how to get all of this to work. And they figured out how to manufacture these absolutely tiny little parts. It is technology, but it's not electronic. Would it be way cheaper to make this watch be electronic? Just put a battery and a little quartz crystal in there and have a motor drive the hands? Yeah, and that's why there are cheap watches. Even digital watches, where it's a chip and an LCD, can be even cheaper than that. And as a side note, part of taking advantage of technology, taking it for granted and all that, we're kind of so into relying on technology where, obviously there's the obvious example of carrying a smartphone around and relying on that for everything, not knowing where to go, you rely on the maps on your phone and not knowing how to communicate with people otherwise and all that sort of thing. But even this, I was talking with a friend who's a teacher, and they were telling me how students, and we're not talking young students, but students are losing the ability to read clocks unless they're digital, because they're so reliant on technology, and they can only tell what time it is if it's a digital display that actually reads the numbers out. So, it's really kind of crazy, and it ultimately makes me just want to say this to sum up. I would advocate that we don't need to give up technology. I'm not one of those crazy people who says we should go back to doing things the way they used to be. I think advancing technology is fantastic, and we need to keep doing that because ultimately it can only make our lives better. But what I would say is this: I think it's worth every once in a while just stopping and reflecting on what technology has done for us so far. And are we relying on it too much? Do we need to disconnect every once in a while? Do we every once in a while need to take a vacation and leave the phone turned off? Maybe don't even take a camera. Maybe just go somewhere that has beautiful scenery and just look at it with our own eyes and appreciate it for what it is, and not feel like we're burdened by the technology and that it's what drives us. We should be the ones driving the technology in our lives and not the other way around. So there's your philosophical podcast for this time. Don't worry, a future one we'll get back into the nitty-gritty tech stuff. I actually have some really good ideas planned. But as always, I am curious as to your thoughts. Have you caught yourself taking technology for granted? Have you caught yourself in that kind of sense of wonderment, like I said, with the vinyl record or, a mechanical watch or something like that, and realizing just how far we really have come, and that maybe we should reflect on where we've been, and that might help us figure out where we're going? I'm just curious as to your thoughts, so be sure to leave them down in the comments below. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.